It's a beautiful beginning of the week, and we're going to jump in today with a Transformer Slag podcast Patreon listener question. Once again, if you want to be part of the Transformer Slag podcast, help support the podcast. Well, no, we're doing a half decent job here in the Transformer world, now celebrating 10K subscribers. Awesome stuff. Thank you all for the love and support. And again, if you want to join the Patreon, again, patreon.com/Protoman, or check the pinned comment or the description below. Gets your name in the end credit scroll. At the end of every segment moving forward, access to our exclusive Discord where we break the news, share lore, share deals, share downloads, keeping you interested in the hobby and helping you save money in this crazy hobby as the world gets more and more expensive. Depending on what tier, you might get a little something in the mail or even access to ask the question for the Patreon listener question. We have a Patreon listener question here from a longtime patron, Space Ghostal, and it's a good one too. I like this one because it's a little bit of a history lesson in a lot of ways. And the question that he asks is, hello, Proto Man, where has there been any other fan-influenced characters that are much like Windblade? Will we ever get another one like these down the line? How successful were these for Hasbro for them to do? Keep doing Prime's work, Space Ghostal. Well, thank you, Space Ghostal. Fan-influenced characters, I mean, really, if you want to like date back in the prehistory before, let's say, Windblade, which was a fan vote kind of created character, the very first fan-influenced characters really stem from E-Hobby, because we had all those seeker characters in the background of different rainbows of color schemes, and we had all kinds of fan, theories of certain characters. And when E-Hobby came onto the scene, E-Hobby was a company that was affiliated with Takara Tomy, and they were ran by a company called Part One. And they were just this company that would make supplemental exclusive Transformer figures that were straight up repaints of pre-existing molds that were available at the time. And an individual that worked with E-Hobby named Hirofumi Ishigawa, who was a hardcore Japanese fan of Transformers back in the day and still is to this day, he kind of helped them steer in the direction of like, hey, let's take some of these fan kind of characters and make them a reality. And that's where like the birth of a character like Sunstorm happened, and Road Hauler, where you had like, oh, there's this yellowish orange kind of seeker jet. Why don't we turn this into a character? Hey, there was this character called Hauler, and we never saw him ever again, and he clearly used the grapple mold. Why don't we do something with that? And that's where just those two characters were born out of these kind of extended fan lore that existed throughout the years. And Japan was filled with that kind of stuff, where there was a lot of fanzines and fan-made comic books and doshinjis, as they're called, where you could get these fan stories and stuff that were unlicensed. And those were two that were born of that. And E-Hobby kind of became this source for extended G1 universe characters, where it's like, hey, there's this red Trax that was on the back of the 1985 box art of Generation 1 fighting alongside the Dinobots and the Insecticons and everything like that. Who's that character? It's not Trax, because it's not a blue Trax. Who's this red one? So they went, well, it's Road Rage. It's another. So it kind of like they created this fan kind of lore. And I mean, if you even want to go to like someone like Derek Wyatt, who was a fan also of the Transformers brand and ended up being a heavy important part of the Transformers animated line and all its creation. There was the Lady in Purple, which was this, blink and you'll miss it, feminine kind of shaped seeker jet in the background of the first 3 episodes of Generation 1, and never had a name, kind of just was speculated, hey, purple female, seeker jet, sure, why not? And rest is history, and we ended up getting, Slipstream and everything like that. So there's quite a few examples of that exist. When you get to something like Windblade, and then you continue onward and you go like, has there been any others like that, and was it successful? There was one other after Windblade, and that was Victorion. But Victorion didn't really have the success of Windblade. And for people that, don't really, there's always new people to the fandom that are listening to my voice for the first time sometimes. And, Windblade was something that came out, man, it's coming on 10 years now. Back in 2013, this all kind of came together where Hasbro's like, hey, we're going to do like this fan build bot poll, and we're going to ask you a bunch of questions, and then we're going to throw something together. And it all started like in April 18th to, I want to say, May 17th. It was around that time. It was about a month. But they did two separate full all-out polls, and it started in April 18th of 2013. And they asked you, like, do you want it to be an Autobot or Decepticon? The alt mode, do you want it to be a car, a truck, a tank, a jet, a spaceship, a helicopter, a motorcycle? What do you want that alt mode to be? For the signature weapon, do you want it to be a cannon, a flamethrower, a sword, a mace, a spear, nunchucks, crossbows, For the color scheme, do you want it red and black, green and gold, blue and silver, orange and white, purple and bronze? For the personality, do you want someone who's valiant, sneaky, a hotshot, secretive, all kinds of different, personality archetypes and tropes. And so those were voted on, tabulated. And then they did a second run of votes. And then it was like, how do you want the name of the character to be? Do you want it to be, and this is great because you really think about what Windblade could have been called: Eclipse, Charon, Centurion, Cashitron, Windblade, or Wraith. And then the gender, you had a choice, male or female. The origin of this character, which part of Cybertron did it come from? And honestly, they didn't stick with this in the end. But you had a choice of Kaon, Iacon, Athiex, Callus, and Praxis. And in the end, Kaon won, but we all know Windblade comes from Cadmus and all the other stuff like that. So it's kind of different in a lot of ways. Than that one didn't stick with it. And then, specialty, like special abilities. Was it a combat medic, a bodyguard, have telepathy, recon, specialist in combat, close combat? So all of this was tabulated. All of that was put together. And it all ended on, I believe it was May, I'm trying to remember. I think it was May 17th. I think it was about a month that block happened. And at the end of May 17th, Hasbro had all of that information, and they dropped it all in the lap of Lenny Penzica. Lenny Penzica, for people who aren't aware, worked with the Transformer brand for many years. And the last time that Lenny did something was he took over John Warden's job for just a temporary little bit and worked on the Transformers Legacy line. His biggest contribution from that was the leader class Laser Optimus Prime that we have on shelves today. So Lenny was responsible for that. But Lenny was pretty much, this was all dropped in his lap. And, after that final voting, he pretty much had, he didn't have a lot of time. He had barely 2 months to pretty much put together some kind of an art design or a sketch that would be kind of the final general idea of what this character Windblade would be after having all this voting information. So at San Diego Comic-Con 2013, which was in July, 2 months after Lenny was given all this information in May, they showed that very first image of what Windblade is going to look like. And it was just this image of her, the robot mode, about like the hips up. We didn't see what the alt mode looked like. We didn't have a good idea of any of that. And they just kind of showed, this is Windblade. This is the fan vote character. This is what she looks like. Here's the influences, blah, blah, blah. And stay tuned for that for more in the future. And then they had 7 months to put this whole figure together, have it manufactured and everything, and have a hand-painted prototype ready to be shown off at Toy Fair 2014, which was, again, like 7 months ago, away from that point. And they did. And we got to see that, and that was this amazing thing. And Windblade was born in a lot of ways. Of course, after that came out and she was 100% revealed to the world, she would be attached to the 10th wave of the Transformers Generation line, part of their Thrilling 30 Deluxes. And she would be part of that case assortment with Crosscut, G-Axis, which was that Starscream repaint in orange, and Nightbeat, which was the Bumblebee retool. And that hit retail in July of 2014. Of course, she had already debuted in her self-titled comic book in IDW in April of 2014 called Windblade. And that was a mini-series and would go on to have all kinds of stuff. And she was a ridiculously successful character. But the machine was also behind her. IDW Comics was going to be a big part of developing that character, and she was going to appear in a whole bunch of other media. Just to give you an idea, Windblade, on top of her self-titled debut in her own standalone comic book, she became a big part of the actual IDW 2005 ongoing comic book series. She would be a part of the reboot of the 2019 IDW Transformer comic book series. She was in the Creo comics. She was part of the Sakamoto Legends comic books, which she was a big part of too, because Sakamoto loved his female characters. She was a big part of the Machinima online comic cartoon series that Machinima was doing with the Prime Wars trilogy. So she was part of all of that stuff too, with the Go 90 network. She was part of the multiple different crossovers of IDW stuff, whether it be the Transformers, Star Trek, the My Little Pony stuff, the Terminator stuff. She was part of all of that. Multiple different video game stuff, whether it be Transformer Legends, Angry Birds, Battle Tactics, Forged to Fight, Earth Wars. She's even in the recent Transformers Heavy Metal video game. She was in all of that stuff. Huge push. And she even had a McDonald's toy, you know? Fan-made character, McDonald's toy. And then, of course, like, other versions of that character would then be birthed afterwards. She was, you know, there was a version of Windblade in the Robots in the Skies 2015 cartoon. She was a big part of the Cyberverse cartoon. She was practically like the one of the main characters of Cyberverse, and got a ton of toys just due to those two lines. And of course, on top of that, Cyberverse had a video game called Battlegrounds, and she was a part of that. So Windblade was heavily received, but she also had the machine behind her in a lot of ways to make sure that she would be successful. But fans loved her. She really was, in a lot of ways, the birth, you know, the physical birth of what was so many fan-made female Seeker characters back in the day that had a bit of a Starscream connection when you really think about it. So she was loved heavily. But, I mean, Victorion was a thing too. 2 years after that, they did the same thing with the Create a Bot, now is Create a Combiner. And in 2015, under John Warden, the original Windblade, while it wasn't led by Aaron Archer, that was the Aaron Archer era of design. During the John Warden era, we had the Create a Combiner in 2015, and that was the kind of the same thing. What faction do you want? Autobot or Decepticons? What kind of, you know, torso for the main character? Do you want a jet, fire truck? You know, and the second we saw the choices, we knew that this time around it wasn't going to be a 100% brand new tooled character. This was going to be a repaint of the pre-existing molds that existed within the Combiner Wars line. And that's what Victorion was in the end. She was featured in the IDW 2005 comic books ongoing, but was not featured in the reboot. She was featured in the Machinima cartoon, you know, Go 90, all of that Prime Wars stuff, but not completely, kind of in a limited capacity. She was featured in the Earth Wars mobile game, but no other video games. And that was that. Very limited, you know, probably didn't sell very well. Probably there wasn't as much interest, maybe because it was just a straight up repaint. There could have been a lot of different factors, but it was not as well received. And in fact, I feel personally, of that mold that we got ultimately in the end, you should get the Megatronia repaint, which was done in Japan. That's the fantastic one. That's the Sakamoto version. Go out of your way to pick up that one if you want to get that mold specifically of the Victorion one in a better color scheme and just a more fun interpretation, in my opinion. And, you know, maybe, you know, like the thing that also too is that she didn't make appearances on a lot of stuff that had a wider, you know, sure, the IDW comic book she was in, but it wasn't like that predominant as opposed to, say, Windblade, who had her own standalone series. Maybe if Victorion had her own miniseries to kind of introduce herself, maybe, and focus on those characters in 4 issues, maybe it would have been better. She kind of just more was a second stringer to whatever was going on with a lot of the other characters. And again, her appearance in the Machinima stuff wasn't that predominant. And not to mention, like, after those Prime Wars cartoons, which didn't do very well, Machinima called it quits. You know, that company put all their videos on private in 2019 and then ceased operations completely. And they were no more not long after the Transformers Prime Wars stuff. So who knows what happened there. And again, she was in the Earth Wars mobile game, but I mean, who wasn't in those mobile games? Everyone was put into that one. So I think that the reception of the second time around didn't go very well, and that kind of gave them cold feet. And we've had voting since then. We've had tons of votings. Hey, who should be the next this? Who should be the next that? And the last time we kind of had something like that was in 2019 when they wanted us to know, like, you know, who should be our next Decepticon? Is it going to be Runamuck, Needlenose, or Shrapnel? And of course, Runamuck won that. Now we don't really have that anymore. Now we just kind of have the Hall of Fame voting, and whoever wins the Hall of Fame voting just kind of gets special treatment. Case in point, like the last Hall of Fame voting, Knockout won from the fans. And as a result, Knockout got an RED toy, a Legacy toy, and had a major kind of focus a little bit in the IDW Wreckers comic book miniseries. So I think that that's kind of where the voting is today, is now they just kind of look at the Hall of Fame. But who knows? Maybe one day we might get something where we're going to get another, we create the robot from scratch like we got with Windblade. Because when you really think about it, it's crazy how, from a design standpoint, she was put together only in 2 months. And then from a toy standpoint, after that, another 7 months, we got the hand-painted prototype. And then after that, in less than a year of lead time in the factories, boom, it's in retail. So who knows? Maybe it'd be cool. It'd be cool because Windblade, look, now she's a staple of Transformers fiction. She's just as up there with RC in terms of being a predominant female character in the Transformer world. I almost rival her. I always say, like, Transformers, it's like Marvel, it's like DC and Transformers, where DC, you got Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. That will be your holy trinity of that brand. And with Transformers, at the moment, it's Optimus Prime, Bumblebee, and then Windblade really is kind of that flank on the left side of that trinity in a lot of ways. And I really saw that with Cyberverse, that's kind of where the brand is focused right now. But, RC kind of squeaks her way in there too, depending on which fiction you're talking about. But Windblade really was received well and went on and on to just have tons of merchandise, and still to this day gets tons of merchandise, whether it be model kits or Lego sets or anything like that. Well, not Lego, but Creo sets with the Neza stuff in China. I mean, she did very well for herself, let's put it that way. And it shows that if something like this was probably done again, who knows, might have just as much success and shake up things for the future. So who knows? It would be cool to see, though. It would be cool to see. But as it stands right now, it looks like the Hall of Fame voting really is the only thing we have. And those are all pre-existing characters that then get the rub, that then get the focus. So it would be cool to kind of see something done from the ground up. But, eHobby was just one man kind of taking fan ideas and making them reality. And then the Build-A-Bot thing was, we had Windblade, was a success. Victorion, not so much. And in fact, stuff has been done better with that concept since. So who knows? Who knows? It would be cool. Maybe if we get a new lead design manager, or the current one, if they see something that could be done there, it would be cool to see. It would be cool to see. It's nice once in a while to feel like, as a fan, that we have some way of sculpting the future of our brand and deciding like some cool stuff with that. I mean, really, when you think about it, like, even fictionally, the last time we had anything that mattered like that was we had the voting in 2018 of which I think Versus pack we wanted to have, and it was like Spinister versus Wheeljack, Needlenose versus Trax, and Mirage versus Impactor, and that was for Siege. And when Mirage and Impactor won, we ended up getting that set. We ended up getting those molds, and then those characters ended up becoming predominantly featured in the Netflix Siege series. So that kind of also put that in that direction, where that was kind of the last time that any kind of voting really affected more than just a toy being released. It was actually a fictional thing and everything like that too. Where, again, going back to Knockout with the Hall of Fame, yeah, we got 2 toys, and he was a little bit in the comic book. And the thing is too, and like I said, going back to Windblade, the machine was behind her. Hasbro, the comics, the cartoons, everything, where we're not going to be having IDW in the future. So that important, easier turnover machine, which is comic books as opposed to cartoons, won't exist. So if we ever did get something like that again, we would need something else to be that platform that could really feature her until a cartoon series. Because when you think about it, comic books are a lot easier to put together, than, let's say, a cartoon or even like a video game. So it's something where you would need to have a comic book series to then have her make her proper debut, or his proper debut, whoever this new fan-made character would be. And then a year later, the toy comes out and it appears in a video game, appears in a new Transformers series, or in a movie. Who knows? But that's kind of gives you a bit of an idea. I think it could exist, but you need to have the right tools, and having that machine, again, like I said, behind it. And that was a lot more present in the Windblade era, of the Aaron Archer era of Hasbro, and it still was present in the John Warden era, but it was already kind of starting to fade at that point in a lot of ways, and it didn't work out. But let me know what you think. Do you think it would be cool? Do you think it would be something that people would be excited about? Were you someone who liked Windblade, or alternatively, what did you think of Victorion? Because I mean, my opinions don't really matter. I'm curious more of the larger opinion of things. But did you like those two characters? Were they well put together? Did you like how Windblade was a made from the ground up creation, where Victorion really was just a couple of new head sculpts on pre-existing molds? I mean, there's a lot of ways that it could have been tackled, but I don't know. It's just something that would be cool to see in the future. And again, thank you for the question, Space Ghostal. It really leads to a good historical discussion and things of the past of something that's almost 10 years old now when it first started. So it's always really cool to talk about those kind of things. And if you want to be like Space Ghostal and be a Patreon member, again, patreon.com/Protoman, or check the pinned comments or the description below, help support the podcast, and enjoy the world of Transformers here with me and Transformer Slag.